Stay one more night. Don't you know that my love is
Holy shit. Games are so good during tournament time. Woo-wee.
one more night. And I know that it's not too late. Let's make things right. You just have to believe in fate.
Never use the valet services here because the regular parking is just always relatively empty, but because of tournament time, super packed, and they basically made everyone come down here when I arrive. Alright, we're gonna hop in the car and go over some interesting hand histories. You know what time it is? Hand histories from the Subaru. So in this first one, it folds to me on the button. I have King 9 of Hearts, standard open, in my opinion. What does suck is that there is a pretty heavy rake in this game, which is also one of the reasons why I opened to 20 instead of 15. I don't actually want to be getting loose calls pre-flop, mostly because of the fact that the rake does immediately become $6 post-flop. So if I raise to 15, I'm only winning like $9 from that player. Similarly, if everybody folds, they also take $2. So I like a larger open for that reason. So I open to 20. If the blinds do both fold, I only pick up 6 instead of the actual 8 that is in the blinds. The big blind calls, it's someone that I've played a fair amount with in the past. I think he kind of respects me a lot, tends to fold to me a lot. The flop ends up coming Ace King 5 with 2 diamonds, and now he leads into me for $30. Obviously a pretty big bet. Coming out of game flow, it's pretty strange. Similarly though, like, I don't really think I beat his hand very often. I think he's gonna have an ace here a decent percentage of the time. Sure, sometimes he'll have a flush draw, like maybe Queen 10 or Jack 10 or something like that of diamonds. Obviously, as everyone knows by now, I hate folding, and I feel like I can take this pot away from him. He likes folding to me a lot. So I call the 30. And turn is an offsuit 3, and now he goes same bet. He's playing about maybe 200 at this point, so I think this is a great spot to raise small to set up river jams on like 9 non-diamond rivers, assuming that he doesn't check. I think if the river is a diamond and he checks to me, I might still rip these to try to get him to fold his weak aces. So I make it $80, and he kind of goes in tank. He's like, really, did you turn that 3 on me? You have ace 3. I'm like, God, do I need ace 3? So he thinks for a bit and calls 50 more. River is, I think, like an offsuit 6 or an offsuit 7, something like that. He checks, and I put them all in for like his remaining 150, 140, something like that. He tanks for a bit, ends up folding. It's possible that I had the best hand with the king. Maybe he did, in fact, have a diamond draw. Otherwise, I don't really see why he would lead into me on the flop with an ace. If he did, in fact, have an ace, I think he played it horribly. By playing out of game flow, he essentially told me that he has an ace, and then he feels himself like if I'm raising him, that ace can't be any good, which obviously isn't the case. If the hand had played in a standard fashion where if he does have an ace and he checks, then I think he's going to end up winning this hand almost 100% of the time. I might check back this flop. If he leads turn, maybe I call. River goes check, check. By playing it the way he did, assuming that he did have an ace, he ended up losing the pot for himself. And I just don't like the manner in which he did this. I think you always want to be checking to the pre-flop raiser. There's really no point in to betting out of the game flow dynamics. So when I say, holy crap, was this game good, I really do mean it. As an example, there was a hand where I think the straddle pot, almost the whole table limps, and now the button makes it 40, which is like, what in the hell kind of raises this? It accomplishes nothing, especially in a multi-way pot. Oftentimes, it's just going to go 40s, like 8 ways, which is almost what ends up happening. He makes it 40, and I think they go like 7 ways to a flop, which comes like 8-4 deuce. Now it checks the pre-flop raiser. He puts out like some big C-bet. There's one caller. Turn is an ace. The one caller checks, and now the bettor has about 300 left. He bets half his stack. The caller on the flop folds, and the guy on the button who made it 40, who C-bet this deuce 4-8 flop, has 6-9 of spades. And after the hand, he's like, oh, gotta get in a little advertising. Now I'm gonna get some action. Yeah, buddy, you really need to get yourself some action, given how this guy looked. I mean, yeah, pretty LOL situation. People are just super goofy. Obviously, when I see something like this, I tend to think that they have like a good hand, but it goes to show you that people just are really doing the strangest things that you would never ever think of. Like, I wouldn't think beyond my wildest imagination that this guy on his like first hand, when the whole table limps to him, that he's gonna make it 40 with 6-9 suited, and then basically try to get in all of his money post flop. Like, I have no idea what in God's name he's doing, obviously, other than, you know, gambling. So obviously when the game is playing like this, I go into pretty much nit mode. What I speak about mostly when I'm trying to take advantage of opponents and playing kind of loose aggressive in certain spots completely changes if I'm in a game where essentially nobody's folding pre-flop and you're just going multi-way. There's obviously no point in making raises with hands that don't really play well, like multi-way. So obviously you want to be raising large with your value hands, you know, things like ace king, ace queen, king queen suited, big pocket pairs, things of that nature, where they're going to have some playability and flop well, and hopefully you can stack these opponents who are just playing way too wide. As I mentioned, the game is playing super action. I've been card dead probably for about an hour. I don't think I've actually played a hand for literally an hour. I'm trying to look for spots where if I am going to play some suited connector or something like that, it's in a spot where I can isolate one of the action players. So in this specific hand, under the gun opens to 15. He's one of the specific players who's been playing pretty wild. Folds to me in the cutoff, and I have 4-5 suited. Obviously not going to be folding. I want to be playing him in a pot. At the same time, though, I feel like if I flat, I'm going to get the hitchhikers behind me, so I'd much rather isolate. This way, if I end up making like a pair, it might be good. It's just way easier to play a hand like this heads up than it will be if I'm going 4 or 5 ways. So I isolate to 45, and folds to him. He thinks for a bit and calls. The flop comes queen 6 deuce rainbow, which is great for my c-betting range. I don't think he's going to have an easy time continuing here unless he specifically flopped a queen or is going to have some pocket pair between 7s and queens, which I don't think obviously happens often enough. He checks, and I decided to size up. I obviously don't want to size down because of the fact that I'm not looking to get called light. So I elect to bet 65 into the pot of about 90. And at this point, he tries to min raise me. Unfortunately for him, he thought the bet was 55, so he makes it 110. At this casino, you can't min raise unless you actually put enough chips in the pot. So even if you're $1 short, then it's not considered a raise and it's considered just a call. Obviously with my nut gutter here, I don't want to be getting raised, so it's kind of perfect situation. He ends up just calling. The turn is a 4, now I make a pair, and he leads into me for like $135 or $145, something of that nature. Obviously, now that I've picked up equity, I'm not folding. He's a giant monkey. I think I could have the best hand here a decent percentage of the time. Really what he's representing is a hand like ace, queen, king, queen, and is a hand like that going to be trying to like get all the money in post-flop, especially now that the turn is a 4. It's a great spot for me to be continuing with here. So I call. The river's a deuce pairing the board, and now he puts out like the same bet. I think he bets like 145 on the river. I don't love it. Obviously when he bets this small, it feels like he's going to have a value hand, like a queen, maybe queen 10, queen jack, something of that nature. The thing is I don't think he's going to be min-raising me out of position with a queen, like queen 10, queen jack. So by the river, essentially the only hand he's representing is ace queen. I assume if he has a full house, like 6 is full by the river, he's going to be betting larger. I don't love it, but like I said, people have been playing like apes. Obviously, I think everybody in this situation is looking at it like, how are you ever winning with a pair of 4s here? But I think people just don't understand the types of games that I'm playing in. Getting a great price. I call. What are we expecting to see? I mean, I'd like to know, like, let's see in the chat boxes what people think that this guy ends up having. So I call, and he has king jack offsuit for king high. I don't even know like what's going through this guy's mind. Obviously on the river, if he's going to be bluffing, he should be betting bigger. He's got to know that I'm calling his river bet by this. I don't even know what he's trying to accomplish. And I think that's oftentimes why people are so confused in my hand histories, because people do just the strangest, goofiest things that on the river, when you're getting like 4-1 with a pair, you're just like, I guess I call, because they could have God knows what. And sure enough, he ends up showing up here with king jack high. As I mentioned, the reasoning for my call by this river is pretty simple. He's representing a pretty narrow range of like ace queen. I don't think he's betting any other hands like queen 10 or queen jack 4 value, maybe, but really are those hands check min raising the flop? Pretty unlikely. So it just seems like he's getting out of line doing something really goofy. So when I have a pair, I like to call. The very next hand after the 4-5 of spades hand, I pick up ace queen offsuit in a straddle pot. Under the gun limps, I make it 40, I think like 2 to his left. And now it folds back to the straddler who calls. The limper folds. Yeah, I don't really know what his plan was. We go heads up to a flop, which comes ace 5-5 rainbow. He checks, and I decide to check back. I think in this situation, it's important to balance some of your aces, because you don't want your flop check back range here to be strictly like pocket pairs, king high, things of that nature. Otherwise, your opponents are going to abuse you when you do check back boards such as this. So I check it back. He is fairly short. I think he's playing about 200. So I think I could still get all of his money in post-flop if he does end up having an ace. The turn is a 7 of spades, so now there's 2 spades. He checks again, so it's time to go for some value. I bet 40 into about like the $85, $90 pot, whatever that is. And he calls. The river's the queen of spades, which brings a backdoor flush. And now he checks. At this point, I'm not really afraid of him picking up the backdoor flush. I think he'd be much more likely to be leading. He's at about 150, 160, maybe 170. I don't know, somewhere around that. And I decide that his most likely hand here is going to be an ace. Because of the queen, I think he thinks he's going to be chopping a fair percentage of the time. I did just show down the 4-5 of spades, so I think it's a great spot to just rip it in to try to look like I'm bluffing. Obviously, I can get bets smaller and just always get value from an ace, but I think if he has an ace, he's not folding very often. So I end up jamming it all in. He goes to the tank, ends up finally calling, shows me that he did have an ace. Obviously, great river for me, probably because it makes him feel like he is now going to chop against a lot of my aces if he does have a weak ace. And after that, that was kind of one of the last bigger hands that I did play. There was another situation where I went to go grab a beer with a guy, shout out to Alan, who just had a question for me regarding poker. And so I went to have a beer, came back. The very next hand that I come back, I pick up pocket 10s at a straddle pot. I make it 45, and we go 3 ways to a flop, which was queen 7-4. Checks to me. I decide to check it back. Turn is a 6. Now the small blind leads for like 50, 55, something like that. The player in between folds. I call. The river, I think, is a 4, pairing the board. And now again, he bets like 55 or 60. Same bet. Pretty easy call for me. I think he's going to have not a queen here very often, depending on this sizing. I think what he's trying to do is trying to get the showdown with a hand like a 7. I call, and sure enough, he ends up having 7-5 suited. Kind of goes to show you why playing hands like this out of position from the small blind for a big raise are just not worth it. You're not going to flop a big enough hand often enough. And more importantly, when you do end up making like a second best hand, like a 7, you end up just value owning yourself in a situation like this. Obviously, if he checks the turn, now I'm going to be betting, and I'm probably going to get like at least 1 street of value out of him in this situation, maybe 2 streets by the river. So again, you know, if you're going to be playing a hand like 7-5 suited, you want it to be in position. I don't mind his call on the button. If he has his hand on the button, now he gets to bet the flop. On the turn, my hand's going to be, you know, pretty capped, so he can try taking me off of it. But because he's out of position, the hand just plays poorly. Anyway, that's all. I ended up winning $1,000 on the nose. Actually, it was 1,001. And ended up leaving early. My wife wasn't feeling good this morning, so she decided to work from home. And we decided that we're going to go and have a nice dinner together before picking up Charlie. That's all she wrote. Thanks for checking out the vlog. I really appreciate everyone coming up to me. I've had like at least 3-4 guys come up to me at the casino, say they like the vlog. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all the comments. All right, have a great night.
Stay one more night. Don't you know that my love is true? Let's make things right. I understand what you're going through. Stay one more night, and I know that it's not too late. Let's make things right. You just have to believe in me.